Good evening and welcome to the week 3 lecture. Let's go ahead and take a look at the agenda. Okay, cool. So this class is taking a three-pronged approach to learning about research methods. The first prong of this approach is theory. Okay, so you're getting a bunch of research methods theory, and that's coming from you reading the textbook and taking the quizzes. The first quiz of which we're going to review today. The second prong is SPSS through the SPSS lecture notes. And again, by now, I think everyone understands you're not actually using SPSS, but you've probably used SPSS in the past, or if it's new to you, you can see how the calculations are done in SPSS, and you can relate that back to when you took statistics potentially by hand. But the important thing that you need to get out of these SPSS lecture notes for this class is how to interpret different statistics, because you're going to have to know how to interpret various statistics when you, I guess, do your method section. There's some data there in the participant section, which we'll get to, but then also your results section. So you're not going to be running your own statistics in this class. Rather, when it comes time for you to assess your hypotheses, look at the analyses that are related to your hypotheses, I'm going to run those analyses, but you're going to have to interpret the SPSS output that I give you. Of course, I'm going to help you out, but going through prong 2 SPSS lecture notes will help you do a lot of the heavy lifting. Prong 3 is a research paper. Okay, so the lectures are centered around this research paper. The discussion forums are centered around this research paper. And then by other assignments, it's really just rough drafts that you turn in periodically. So basically, I think you might have realized this by now, but every week you're doing a little piece of the paper, and those little pieces of the paper will culminate into the appropriate rough drafts, and the rough drafts will culminate in your final paper that is due at the end of class. Okay, so that's the three-pronged approach to research methods. Let's go ahead and take a look at quiz 1. Okay. Let me verify, yep. In addition to making many decisions about how to conduct research, which of these must a researcher also do when engaging in a research study? Document the decisions made. Yeah, this is really helpful. As you're conducting research, a lot of people keep some sort of research handbook, or maybe they document what they're doing on their phone. So as you're reading research articles, did you get any insights? What participants have you decided to include in your study? There's so many decisions in research that need to be documented. It's good just to write everything down so you don't kind of forget where you've been. Which type of research results are not reduced to numbers? These are qualitative. So quantitative is when we're dealing with numbers, okay? And you'll see that if you look at personality and gay marriage attitudes, that would be something like the Rosenberg self-esteem scale, right? Where there's 10 questions related to self-esteem, and they're answered on a Likert scale. And then you can calculate an average self-esteem score for every single participant in the study. What's qualitative would be there's a few qualitative questions actually in personality and gay marriage attitudes. One is basically, why do you, or why would you vote to support same-sex marriage, or why would you vote to not support same-sex marriage? And then there was also some writing conditions related to writing about mortality, writing about taking an important exam. So those words are qualitative, numbers are quantitative. And qualitative can be coded to make it quantitative. A unified explanation of observations is called a theory. Okay, so data exists. Okay, you can collect data, you can calculate the relationship between gender and self-esteem, for example, and maybe you find that females tend to have higher self-esteem than males. So that is objective data. The theory is your explanation of why that is the case. So whereas there may be one set of objective data that you're looking at, there could be many different theories that explain that data. It's a very powerful concept. So theories aren't right. They're just an explanation for data. The fundamental difference between experimental and non-experimental study designs is that experimental study designs use a manipulation or treatment. And what does this look like and why is it important? Okay, let's say I'm conducting a study and I want to see if cognitive behavioral therapy works better than let's say just taking a drug, medication. Okay, so one condition is participants receive cognitive behavioral therapy. The other condition is participants don't receive cognitive behavioral therapy, they just receive medication for their depression. Okay, so I recruit 100 students for my study. Okay, and I say be there at 7 a.m. Okay, they show up at 7 a.m. Well, let's say 50 of them show up at 7 a.m. and other 50, they kind of trickle in 7:01, 7:02, 7:03, all the way up until, let's say, 7:15, 7:20. Okay, so let's say I take the first 50 and I put them in the cognitive behavioral therapy group. I take the second 50 and I put them in the drug-only group. And then, you know, they do their thing. Those in the drug group take their drug. Those in the cognitive behavioral therapy group get their cognitive behavioral therapy. And then I measure everyone in the group on depression, and I find the average depression score for those in the cognitive behavioral therapy condition. I find the average depression score for those in the drug condition, and I compare them. Now, let's say that I find that those who are in the cognitive behavioral therapy condition are exhibiting less depression than those in the drug condition. So it's showing, my study showing that cognitive behavioral therapy actually works better than taking medicine. Okay. Well, what's the problem here? The problem here is I did not use random assignment. Okay. I just took the first 50 and I threw them in the cognitive behavioral therapy group. I took the second 50 and I threw them in the medication group. Okay. I introduced bias because I didn't randomly assign people to one group or another. The first 50 people actually had something in common. Okay. The personality trait conscientiousness. Those who are high in conscientiousness, they tend to show up on time. They tend to show up early, in fact. Okay. So I took all those people who are high in conscientiousness and I threw them in the cognitive behavioral therapy group, right? And then all the people who trickled in who were lower in conscientiousness, I threw them in the medication group. Okay. Well, what's going on there? There was a confound. I wasn't just looking at cognitive behavioral therapy versus medication. Sure, that did exist, but the confound was those in the cognitive behavioral therapy group were high in conscientiousness. Those in the medication group were lower in conscientiousness. So was it the cognitive behavioral therapy that led to a greater decrease in depression, or was it those who are high in conscientiousness tend to follow a treatment regimen better than those who are lower in conscientiousness, which then led to the more positive outcome of decreased depression. Okay, so this is the importance of that manipulation, that random assignment. So how can we do this? Let me go ahead and pull up a random number generator, random.org, super useful. So what could we have done? Okay, we could have set this random number generator to 1, which is the cognitive behavioral therapy group, 2, which is the medication group. And we could have looked at the first person at the door and said, okay, you're in the medication group. Of course, we wouldn't tell them that. We would just say, come over here, come with me. The second person, they're in the medication group. The third person, they're in the medication group. The fourth person's in the cognitive behavioral therapy group. The fifth person's in the cognitive behavioral therapy group. Okay, the sixth person's in the medication group. And what is this doing? By randomly putting people in the cognitive behavioral therapy group or the medication group, there's a greater chance, and we can be confident in this, that those in the cognitive behavioral therapy group have nothing in common except for the fact that they're receiving cognitive behavioral therapy. Okay, meaning it's not likely that they're all high in conscientiousness because we randomly assign people. Okay, also those in the medication group, it's likely that they have nothing in common except that they're in the medication group. And that's the power of random assignment. Random assignment is a good word. Okay, so that was a long explanation, but that's the manipulation. The manipulation is randomly assigning people to one group or the other group, letting them go through that treatment, medication versus cognitive behavioral therapy, and then measuring them at the measuring their outcome. While experiments allow researchers to propose answers to causal questions, in some cases, experiments are not appropriate. The most common reasons are it would be unethical to conduct some types of experiments on people. Yeah, this is a fact. So the experiments that cannot be conducted on people are typically conducted on animals. We see this with drug research usually. Specifically, the thing that comes to mind right now is tobacco research. So whereas you could not randomly assign a human being to use tobacco or not use tobacco, you can randomly assign an animal to use tobacco versus not tobacco. This type of research allows researchers to collect information about attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors of a population. This is a survey. So surveys are really useful. And in fact, Personality and Gay Marriage Attitudes is a survey that was administered to a bunch of introductory psychology students in different settings. So surveys are usually cheap. When you have to call people into a laboratory to conduct an experiment, that's very time consuming and thus costly. Whereas a survey you can administer online now, or you can go to a classroom of 500 people and pass it out and you have 500 results, right? Qualitative researchers often approach their research planning with an exploratory approach, which uses inductive logic. Researchers who are primarily interested in a topic where little is known may find the best approach to be the use of qualitative methods. Yeah, if little is known about self-esteem, well, how can you measure self-esteem? Okay, which isn't the case, but so what would you do? Well, you could follow around someone who has really high self-esteem and observe them and document how that self-esteem plays out in their life. Okay, so this could be a case study on someone who has high self-esteem. You could do a case study on someone who has low self-esteem. By doing that, you gain a greater understanding of that phenomenon. There's a lot of case studies out there. There could be case studies on schizophrenia, case studies on depression, case studies on happiness, case studies on organizations, case studies on those with autism, etc. And the whole point is to understand the phenomenon. Program evaluation is almost always used for practical decisions, which is a form of research called applied research. In direct response to the unethical medical research conducted in Nazi concentration camps during World War II, the Nuremberg Code was formulated to define legitimate medical research. Okay. And in part, this led to the institutional review boards, which means, and you'll see when you look at personality and gay marriage attitudes, there's a stamp on there from the University of California, Riverside Institutional Review Board, because like all studies, they had to review that study and they approved of that study. Okay. What, if anything, is considered when managing potential harms to participants in a research plan? Harms should be minimized, but weighed against the potential benefit to society. But yeah, generally, if there's any harm to human beings, it's going to be rejected. Okay. So there you go. That is quiz 1, topics 1 through 11. Let's go ahead and look at the week 2 discussion assignment. I guess I didn't need to hit the edit button, but that's fine. Okay. So part 1, based on the variables that you identified in the week 1 discussion assignment, okay, create 3 hypotheses. These will be your hypotheses for your research paper. Okay, I gave some examples and I had you respond to a few other students. Okay, so now we go to announcements regarding feedback. This is the first bit of formal feedback that I'm going to give everyone. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to personally go to the week 2 discussion assignment and I'm going to reply to all of your initial posts. Okay, and I'm going to approve and or revise your hypotheses. So the hypotheses that I give you will be the hypotheses that you're stuck with for the rest of the class, unless you decide to change them, and you'll have to let me know. Okay. I plan to give this feedback to you Wednesday by 11:59 p.m. and it might be sooner. Once I give the feedback, you might notice it, but I'll definitely send you an email. So a good question to ask ourselves right now is, where are we in the research process? So we kind of skipped ahead, okay? We started here, right? Design a study and collect the data. What's our study? It's my study, it's your study. Our study is personality and gay marriage attitudes. And the reason why we do this is I don't think it's very practical to collect our own data, okay, during this term. So I'm providing you with a professional survey, okay, a vetted survey, and data. So we kind of started here, and then we're stepping back a little bit. So the week 1 discussion post, you kind of looked around, you're like, well, I'm interested in these variables, right? So you kind of found your motivating interest, okay? And then I had you generate your research questions. We didn't do research questions because, again, a research question would be, what is the relationship between gender and self-esteem? I had to do hypotheses. What's a hypothesis? I believe that, let me rephrase that. It is hypothesized that females will tend to have higher self-esteem than males, period. Okay. So this was the week 2 discussion forum. The week 3 discussion forum is going to move you in the direction of understanding previous research. Okay. Well, how do you understand previous research? Okay. You have to go to the library website. Okay. So I think some of you may have already gone to the library website to go before for some of your other classes. But if you don't know how it works, here's the website for Valley College. So you go there. Okay. And this will be the top of the page. Okay. And you can just control find for psychology. Okay, you'll notice there's a psychology under health, behavioral science, and medicine. There's also a psychology under nursing, but then there's a psychology. And there's 2 different routes you can take. There's psychology pro guest. Sorry, not guest, quest, in fact. And then there's this one, the EBSCO. Okay. So you can click on that, and if you click on that, it's going to take you to this screen. Oops. Okay, let's go ahead and click on it. So it'll look like this, psychology database. What I recommend you click on is advanced search. Basic search might work as well. But really what you're going to have, if you look at all your hypotheses, there are 2 variables. So let's say you picked self-esteem. Okay, so you do self-esteem and gender. And you could search anywhere. Is there, I think there's a title search. So you can mess around with it. So you can see full text. Peer reviewed is a good one. So pick peer reviewed. And what we want to look at are scholarly journals. Dissertations are fine. Okay, and you do a search. Okay, so you'll see a bunch of articles here, and the cool thing is you'll see full text. If you click on this, okay, it'll take you straight to the article. You might have to like download it. Oh, there it is. So now you can download it. So essentially what you're doing here is you have your hypotheses, right? So let's say one of your hypotheses is, it is hypothesized that females tend to have higher self-esteem than males. Okay. So now you're like, okay, well, let's see what previous research has found, right? So you did your search and now you're looking at this. Okay. And what this is going to lead to next week is you're actually going to summarize these articles that you find. But this week you're just finding them. And what criteria do you need to follow? Okay. All of your sources need to be empirical journal articles. Well, how do you know if it's an empirical journal article? It has to have a method section, meaning they conducted a study, and it has to have a results section. Oh, clearly here in the abstract, which is the summary, they have a methods and a results, but we can go through the paper. Method, okay, looks like this one's working. And results. so we know this paper can work for us. Okay. If it's asking you for credentials, you can go to this site. You'll definitely need this for the EBSCO. Okay, so you click on this and then it'll show you the username and password that you need to put in as a Valley student. So that's all you need to do this week. So definitely let me know if you have any questions. This will probably take you a little while just to mess around with if you're not used to it. Give yourself a good hour just to browse. Let's take a look at the week 3 discussion. Okay, restate your hypotheses / research questions from your week 2 discussion. So you just have hypotheses. You may post revised hypotheses / research questions if need be. Okay, so that's part 1. And again, I'm going to try to get you that hypothesis feedback as quickly as I can so that hopefully in part 1, you're posting your finalized hypotheses. But if you want to just go ahead and get things done, you can go ahead and just use what you have for now. Okay, that's fine with me. Part 2, find and link / attach 3 articles related to one or more of your hypotheses. Okay, again, from the week 2 discussion. So not only that, I want you to describe how they are related to your hypotheses and research question. Part 2, respond to 2 other students. That should say part 3. I'll fix that. Yeah, let me clean this up a little while I'm here. Restate your hypotheses. You may post your revised hypotheses if need be, right? So we're not going down the route of research questions. Good, that works. And then part 3. Respond to 2 other students. Provide feedback regarding their posted hypotheses. Let them know if their articles are appropriate. That is, are their articles empirical articles? Remember, empirical articles have a method section as well as a results section. Okay, if they don't have those, you cannot use them. It's as simple as that. Also, please let them know if something is unclear and if possible, suggest a correction. Okay, perfect. So that's what you're doing for your week 3 discussion. Okay. And then we have SPSS lecture 2 notes due. And again, all you're doing there is no SPSS you're doing. You're watching a video from my data analysis class, okay, where I take you step by step. I think it's very informative. But what you're focusing on are the interpretations. Okay, you can literally just copy and paste the interpretations from my answer key into your notes. But again, the point is for you to understand what's going on. So definitely email me if you have any questions and or come to office hours, okay? And that's all I have for this week 3 lecture video. Take care. Have a great evening.